Welcome, everyone, to today's Learning Genie webinar. I'm Jen Dunn with Learning Genie, and I'm pleased to provide you the presentation of Moving Your Portrait of a Graduate from Poster to Practice, a roadmap for school leaders. To unpack all of that, we brought in an expert speaker, Mr. Toby Fisher. Toby is an educational technology professor from Otterbein University with 15 years of experience in portrait of a graduate work, and 28 years in education from teacher to principal to keynote speaker. His current research explores how AI builds student agency, which is perfect for today's conversation. Toby's going to share the hard lessons learned and expert strategies of how to bring portrait of a graduate to your classrooms in a real way instead of left on the poster. Please join me in welcoming Toby Fisher.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being with us today. So today I want to share with you a framework to take us from just that, taking our beautiful posters that we create of our portrait of a graduate, and then how do we intentionally and purposely build this into our daily teaching and learning for every student. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Before we start, I would love to hear where you guys are. Why did you believe that your district or state created a portrait of a graduate? What was the big hope or goal behind it? So in the chat, if you can share your experience, and I look forward to give you a second to share those.
We're just waiting for the responses to come through.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's going to take them a second.
It
Get
is.
some good teacher wait time, which is a little awkward during a webinar, but yes, we all give our wait time.
Very true. And for some, I mean, portrait of a graduate's on the horizon, and some have been working with it for years. It really depends on your state and really what your district's after.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some people in the audience that it is new with, and some who've been, like me, it's been part of their lives for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We appreciate Tammy being the first to get that one in there.
Thanks, Tammy. So Tammy says, with knowledge and skills and traits students should have to succeed in life, what our graduates are leaving high school with. Absolutely.
And then I see Christina, our students need to be ready for success in the workforce beyond the classroom and beyond bridging 21st century skills.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends out there who still make fun of that term 21st century skills since we're a quarter of the way through the century. So,
Fair.
as you guys are typing, just because I want to respect your time, I'm going to go ahead and hop in. And I will share a little bit of my journey through Portrait of a Graduate. So for me, Portrait of a Graduate is the dream. Is if you imagine walking into a third grade classroom and seeing students collaborating and working together and asking big questions and showing their thinking and producing items, all while still being able to read at or above grade level because the content still matters. Then walk into an eighth grade classroom at the end of the year and they're doing a capstone presentation that encapsulate everything they had learned in their first 9 years of education. And then at that graduation, the week before graduation, you walk up and you start talking to a group of seniors. And every single senior you talk to can articulate what their plan is beyond graduation and how they have the skills to either go to college, go into a career, or into the military, and how they're going to utilize their 13 years of education to empower them to do what's next. To me, that's the dream, and I think that's the true power of building a portrait of a graduate. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about where it began for me. So if we all remember back in the beginning of the 21st century, the Partnership for 21st Century Skills built this framework that's on the left there. And it really got us start talking about the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. And at that same time, I took a job with a fancy title called 21st Century Learning Coach. And our job was to bring the 4 C's to the classrooms in a large district in Central Ohio. And there was 4 of us on the team at first. We ended up growing to 6 after our first year. And at the same time, we found out Ken Kay, the president of Partnership for Century Skills, was a great person to lean on, and he was happy to come out to district. So he came and started working with us. And Ken came to us and said to our district and our board and our leadership that the 4 C's were a great place to start. But for these to truly make it into each classroom, what he was finding was local districts needed to make them personal. And at that time, we didn't have the term portrait of a graduate. It was still years away from being made. So we spent countless time really as a district community building the 6 skills that were personal to us. And so I put on the screen there in the middle, creative thinker and innovator was the one that I owned. Each member of our team owned one of them. And we built rubrics and we really became the expert in that area. What was fun about that experience is a few years later, Ken and his number 2, Valerie Greenhill, wrote a book. And in that book, they kind of talked about the process that not just our school, but a couple other schools that he had worked with had processed. Jump ahead a bunch of years, that process became what many of your districts or states have experienced as you develop a portrait of a graduate. So I was out kind of on that first piece. The problem was these are the skills that we were looking at the time, and they really haven't changed much. And when I think back to the kids who were in I teach a class with seniors this year who want to be teachers. And I think about in 2010, when we were doing this work, they were still in diapers. And when I talk to them, they have some of these skills, but by their senior year, if we're truly doing the work of our portrait graduate, they should have mastered those skills by now. And I can say my students have not mastered these skills. Are they ready for college? Are they going to be fine in the world? Yes. But I think when we listen to our employers, they want more out of our students to be able to come in better prepared for a career in college. And I also teach at the college level. And I will say many of my college students still, I treat them a little bit more similar to my high school students because they weren't ready. So, how do we close that gap? How do we make sure and ensure every student, not just some, but every student who walks into our school is there? So that's what I want to work on today is we'll talk about a framework for how we can get there.
Excellent. Thanks, Toby. So, really, to go through that framework, we'd love to hear from everyone in the audience in a poll. So, when you think about how you would rate your present Portrait of a Graduate implementation for where it is right now, no judgment. 1 being on the poster, it's a bit more aspirational right now. 5 being pockets of practice where some teachers and departments are utilizing it, but it's not widespread across the school. And 10 being in practice. So it's fully immersed within curriculum and the district. So give us a ranking, just drop your number between 1 and 10. And you should see it all pop up on your screen in the poll.
So while you guys are voting, I'll tell you where I am. In 2010, we began our work, and I stayed in that job for 3 more years. So after 3 more years of really implementing, we really did not have, we did great work, and I'll share some of the work we did in the next couple of slides, but we did not have everybody doing it. Some teachers were, so we were a solid 5, but we were nowhere near to that 10 that we really want to be. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to vote and give us where you're at in the process. So the question then becomes, how do we move our district from where we are today to becoming a 10? And realize it's a process. anything like this probably takes 7 years. And that number comes going back to when Ken K was working with us, is he told us if you want to do this with purposeful and intentionality, it'll take you 7 to 10 years for this to become everything that your students should become. Um, so let's take a look at the process. At the end of the webinar, you will get a copy of this framework shared with you. So feel free to take notes, good things, but you will also get a copy that'll be very similar to the slide deck, and this is being recorded, so you can refer back to. Like all good teaching, we start with the end in mind. I was trained in understanding by design, Wiggins and McTighe, those of you who've been around for a while. So Wiggins and McTighe taught us that the first thing to do is start with the end in mind. So once you've built your portrait of a graduate, you have to build a way to measure it. And we also know that what gets measured gets done. The reason why we work so hard to get our students to pass the state test, one, yes, we want our students to master the standards, but we're measuring those state standards with those tests that the students take at the end of the year. So if you look on the left is a copy of our creative thinker and innovator rubric that we made back in, we finished this, I think, in 2011. I would say we put in probably 200 hours of between all the people that were in my team. On the right, Curriculum Genie now has it built in where it will help you build yours. You can take what it gives you, you can edit and analyze. What's great about it is we built one rubric, K-12. It will actually build your rubric in grade bands so that you can use it vertically across a grade level with all content areas, but you can also horizontally grow your students from kindergarten through graduation. Once you have that tool, the next thing is to start to prepare your teachers and students. What we did is we started creating cohorts. So we were a district with 5,000 students. I can't remember how many teachers across the district. And we started creating cohorts of 25 teachers a year. If I would do the math on that, if I kept doing 25 teachers a year, it would have been 10 years before we even trained all of our students and teachers. But to be honest, there were 6 of us, and we personally coached each one of those. Today, AI has made a huge change in that. So we'll talk about how when we're preparing our teachers and students to grow, this is the next step is where we got hung up. We presented and shared to all of our units, to all of our teachers. But now, how do I, as a teacher, with all the time constraints I have, and I only know what I know what I came in with, which was how I was taught to teach. How do I build this into my lesson plans? And where do I find the time to build this into my lesson plans? So the next thing I want to show you is do a little live demo of what it looks like to use an AI tool to fill the gap from where we were at the time. So I'm going to have to stop sharing for
And
just a
Toby,
second.
just as you're bringing that up, I think we do have the poll results to see where everyone's sitting.
Oh, yes.
Um, and as we were preparing for this, I think one of the most interesting parts of what you were saying about being in a 5, even though you're sitting in a bit of that expert chair of Portrait of a Graduate, was some of the things that would really change being in the AI era. So I'm so excited to see your demo. So poll results, we are seeing we've got, it's fairly even actually. We've got 20% at a 2, 20% at 3, 20% at 4, 20% at 5, 20% at 6, and that is as high as we go. So I think some good modest self-assessment given the challenge that we face with Portrait of a Graduate, which Toby, you're right in line, so you weren't far off.
Yeah, we felt, and I'll say we felt really good about the work we were doing, but at the same time, it was challenging.
Mhm.
Okay, I will take on some of the, by the way, this is Jing from Learning Genie as a CEO co-founder. I will support Toby to do some of the live demo about how we turn the partial graduate, okay, building to, currently you can adapt into your current curriculum, but I want to show you actually you can maybe the sample is creating from a fresh. So actually I got this from okay, let me Toby, so you have the description, right, for me? Let me grab
Yep.
this. Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to build a unit that is targeted to ninth grade students. And I just chose to do English language arts. But what's beautiful about the tool, and one of my favorite things, when I was a principal, once a quarter, I was a middle school principal at a STEM school. I required my teachers to do one cross curricular unit once a quarter. So they had to horizontally align for a couple weeks. So you could use the tool to select multiple content areas, but I know that that's not the structure of most schools. So I just selected one content area, being English language art, for this. And I just chose a unit that's really dear to me, which is one called Who Am I, which I think a lot of high school freshmen struggle with personal identity. So this is a unit where they learn how to do narrative writing around the idea. And this isn't my idea. I stole this from some of the best English teachers I ever worked with when I was a principal. But they do narrative writing to study who they are as a person to end up helping them um, move forward. So you'll see that in here we put in a description and a title for a unit. We put in the grade level. I would probably run this unit for 1 to 2 weeks, so I can change that to a 2-week unit. You can change that to I have built units as long as 4 weeks using Curriculum Genie. And then I pick the state I'm in, the state standards. The neat thing is it's really intelligent. I've had it auto adapt standards before, and it actually picks the right standards. But for this, if I was actually doing it, I would hand select. For time, we'll let it auto adapt. But I would then pick the state standards that I want to teach. So I pick my narrative writing standards. And then here's where the magic comes in when it comes to Portrait of a Graduate. You can load your district or state's Portrait of a Graduate into the tool, and you can click on it. And you can see on the screen here where the state of New York's Portrait of a Graduate's there. And it will then create an articulation of what the skills look like at each age level. Your organization can go into that and say, you know what, I like that, but I want to tweak this a little. So you end up making those changes, and then you save it, and that is saved for your organization or state in some cases. Then once I do that, when I'm building a unit, I can use these check boxes to check which skills I want in here. So if I'm building a unit for English language arts and about narrative, I probably am thinking I want kids to be able to communicate that message with themselves and with others of who they are, because that shows that you really understand who you are. And I probably want some creativity and critical thinking in there also. But that's some of my bias towards the different skills. So once I do that, I click save. And then and I'm going to skip there's so many other bells and whistles that we're not going to hit in this demo. But I will then hit generate, and it will start to begin to generate our unit. So to save time, I'm going to take the screen back over from Gene for a second. And I'm going to treat this, we called this our cooking show. That when I created this unit, it took me just under 10 minutes. But at the same time, I don't want you to sit there and watch my screen do the cooking show. So I'm going to kind of give you some glimpses of some other pieces of this. So once I get through that part where I've created, it gives me a unit overview. And notice that these are all dialog boxes. So if I want to add to it before it actually builds the lesson plans, I can come in. I'm in Ohio, so it actually localized this unit to Ohio. So I could even add some details about where I'm at. Then it gives me just an overview of the trajectory. So what related concepts we'll be studying all the way through the different components of the unit. Then it gives me a summary of the big concepts. So, personality, interpersonal dynamics, empathy, how I communicate and express myself, great ideas. And then one of my favorite parts, going back to my UBD, Understand by Design, is it gives big guiding questions. So, in what ways do personal experiences, family, and local communities shape our sense of self? That, I mean, if I asked that question to my students today, they would probably get into a whole period conversation. Then when I click next, it'll take me in and it'll start to show me an overview of each of the lessons that the unit has. Embedded in each of these lessons are those portrait of a graduate skills that you selected when you were on the opening screen. So in this one, I have an identity gallery walk as the first day. It also builds in Edge protocols if you want. If you're not familiar with Edge protocols, they are just great thinking protocols to get kids thinking about the content. Um, I love using these with my students. And when you get to the final unit, the slide decks for the Edge protocols are built in, which is a priceless amount of time that teachers gain back. Um, and like I said, I do still teach. So I use these in my classroom and my kids love them. So it'll give you all 5 of the lessons. So then I can look at the second week and it'll give me an overview of that week and all the lessons. And then at the top is also a unit overview. So I can click this at any time and it'll give me all the details. I'll come back to that in a second. So now I've seen the overview. If I like it, if I hadn't already created this, it'll be a button where I can start to create the actual lesson plans. And it'll take me, then I can go dive into, oh no, there we go. It'll let me dive into, I might have too many tabs open for this one. It'll let me dive into the full lesson plan. These are amazing. Everything that we want our teachers to be able to do in the classroom, it has built into. So not just our Portrait of a Graduate, which is a place that we want to build our skills up, but it gives us the materials, starts to give the vocabulary that we're going to go in. These are implementation steps that our staff can use. Over on the right are resources that are built into the lesson plan. So the teachers don't have to go out and find additional materials. They're already built into the unit plan. I know I'm going fast through these. I highly suggest if you haven't built one, just click and build one so you can see all this. The next part is it builds a starter slide deck for your teachers to use. And some of you on here could be teachers who would use these. These are great. They have those open-ended questions that you start with, and they lead through the content. What I really like about them is I'm someone who always preach to my staff, 5 to 10 minutes of direct instruction is a great way to introduce a lesson, then get the students working, talking. The person doing the work is doing the learning. And so this gets them active and learn in the process and a little bit more of the student and less of us as the instructor working. Also, and this is a newer feature of this, is the ability that it'll create anchor text. So you could read through this article, and this article will lead through. Many of us have different services that we get anchor text from. This actually builds in an anchor text into the lesson plan that's connected to the essential question that I started with of who am I. It'll give teaching tips. It'll come back to the state standards and teaching tips specifically explicit to the standards. Some universal design. So we go into our learners that either are at different places. The other piece that I didn't show you earlier is I can change the lexile or reading level of those reading passages. So I can tell it what reading level I want those to be at. It also gives some support ideas for our English language learners who are in our classrooms. So some cultural responsive practices that can be built into. And then this is the piece. I actually presented this. I was doing a professional development for teachers on Monday, and this was a piece of the professional development. I showed them this, and they were in love. Is we really need good formative assessment that is tied to the level of our standards. In Ohio, we use DOK, so every standard in Ohio has been tied to the DOK level. Other people are more familiar with Bloom's. You can choose which one you use, but let's say this standard is meant to be taught at a level 3. I can tell it what type of formative question I want to use to assess my kid. So I may use this as an exit ticket or a short truly formative. So I hate to use the word quiz because people think of quizzes as grades, but I can take and say DOK3, just hit regenerate, and this thing will regenerate a high quality question for my students. So just looking at this one, after viewing several classmates' identity collages during the gallery walk, choose 2 different collages, not your own, that stood out, compare and contrast. So there we go, high level thinking, compare, contrast, high proven learning strategy. Um, each way student images, words, symbols tell a story about their identity. We go on from there. So creates and that uses proven teaching strategies.
So,
From there, oh yeah, Gene, hop in.
yeah. Yeah, so actually I want to share what we just started, right? So this is more like a structure of this unit. Can you allow me share where the portrait graduate is?
Yeah.
So here I want to just quickly show you uh, it's a fun thing here. Okay, just when Toby is sharing, we finished the whole unit just now. I'll show you the similar structure, but where the portrait here is like what we just selected for 8th grader. Okay, with the creative innovator, effective communicator. So how we building this thing? So we actually have the small activities, teaching tips for this particular identity unit and for this particular lesson. So here for Creative Innovator, the expectation is students can use imagination and curiosity to explore new ideas, ask questions, and apply flexible thinking when faced with unfamiliar or changing situations. So we create prompt. We actually create tips for teacher to model those activity, such as prompt students to use metaphoric thinking by inviting them to compare their beneath the surface sticky notes to other real-world phenomena that are not always visible, such as seeds growing underground or hidden apps on phone, as they place their notes up on the iceberg. So this lesson is about the identity iceberg, what we selected. But also you can think about effective communicator. So model active listening during the whole class discussion by paraphrasing a student's comment and inviting the others to build on it, highlighting respectful engagement with diverse perspectives. So those are the little 5-minute activity teacher can choose to bring in with the context of this lesson, so they don't feel like, oh, it's I don't know how to teach them about effective communicator, how to teach that competency, but AI can bring the understanding with the lesson, understanding the partial competency, and build those tips into that. Yeah, so a very quick thing is more like the overview, just more Toby has shown, but we also want to showcase is that, hey, this is the standards list, but also this is the portrait competency list. So very clearly, right, you can showcase which lesson, how each competency are embedded into each lesson. For example, this is the collage, right? The first one. So how this creative innovator, effective communicator in this context. So give teacher a lot of small, I would say, activity ideas to embed in everyday lesson. Okay, back to you, Toby.
Yeah, and as Gene shared that, it really goes back to I remember some conversations we had early with our teachers who were feeling overwhelmed, and we would show something like what Gene just showed, and um, it was a few of them was big. I'm already doing some of that, and I'm like, yes, this isn't new. What we're trying to become is more purposeful and intentional in doing this with every kid in every lesson, so that by the time they go through 13 years of our school, K through 12, these things are they can transfer to the next stage of their life. And that's really, like I said, going back to that dream slide, that is my dream, that every kid can transfer things into career college or the military service that they choose to go into. Gene, if you can, let me share my screen again. There we go. So when you finish creating a unit, it takes you to this final screen. And this is another one of my favorite pieces as a Google user is I can click export. If you're not a Google user, you can download PDFs in Word, but you can click this export to Google Drive. And I just want to show you in my Google Drive, here is the 2-week Who Am I unit that I created. It gives me some vocabulary, it gives me an overview, and then it creates a folder for each week of my unit. Inside of each of these weeks are the slide decks. So week 1, lesson 3, let's check out a slide deck that it created for us. So this is the, oh, actually, this is the EDGE protocol that it created for us. So you can see it creates these slide decks that walk us through how to do the sketch and tello. I actually did a sketch and tello 2 weeks ago with my kids on what is the purpose of school. It's fun. And these are, high school seniors I did this with. They love to draw and get, we actually got the crayons out. So it was fun. These are great protocols that I don't care if a kid's 5 or 18, they love to do. So all those are dropped into this Google folder, which makes it easy to find. And then the actual lesson plans are in here. And they're more detailed than, to be honest, anyone's going to want to look for, but it also is so helpful. What I love about it is then I can take these lesson plans and put my personality, my personal spin on each of them. So this doc just walks me through everything that I'd previously shown on the screens, mixed with the Portrait of a Graduate pieces that Gene shown too. So imagine now you and every teacher has started to create these units, and they are being used throughout the district. What is the 4th phase?
Technology. We actually have a great
Yeah,
comment I wanted to share, Toby, while you have that load. Christina
appreciate it.
said, Curriculum Genie's Portrait of a Graduate is amazing. We just used it to co-create a 10-week unit for my ecology heroes to use with the science buddies in the lower grade. So thank you, Christina, for sharing that and some of that coming to life. Here we are.
So, and I would say this is another reason why I would say our district got stuck at 5. While we were going through, I remember one of my teammates and I, like I said, there were 6 of us. We started reaching out to every portfolio company and group in the that we could find, because we knew the next step was we need to be able to collect all the formative work that our students had done in one place, so that we can do 2 things. We can give them high quality feedback in a place that they're always going to, but at the same time, they can see the progress of their work. And that's the piece that we just never found. We ended up using, to be honest, I tested this with a group of seniors. We had them create websites using Google, and it was clunky at best. And there's lots of tools out there, but when I saw this, that I could actually create a portfolio inside the same place where I'd already put all the work for my kids, just amazing to me, because that's the piece that it's not about us as the adults seeing the progress of the kid. It's also about the kid being able to track their own progress, because we want to transfer that ownership to our students. That's the agency part of, that's another webinar, another day, the agency part. But truly, we do want to build that agency in our students so they own their own learning over time. And that's where portfolios come in. The other piece is we also want to have that summative assessment. And if we're doing the formative well, then the summative just takes care of itself. But that summative is also a celebration. So you think about when I talked about that eighth grader early in the year, who at the end of the year, we build a showcase where they build a capstone that takes something they care about, that they've transferred their knowledge of these skills and the content they've learned throughout their first 9 years of school. And they are able to show us this. Well, what if we had a tool that allowed us to put the capstone in and give our students feedback and use the same rubrics that we had been using for the first 8 years to give them feedback on and let them self-evaluate? I am huge on having students self-evaluate them stuff. I think there's more growth in that than the feedback we give. So there's that. Then while comes across as a set of steps, it is not a linear set of steps. At the same time, all this is happening, we all know from everything we've learned about teaching kids content that we need to do a lot of data collection and analysis in the background. That way we can make live adjustments to our teaching and learning. So as we are building those portfolios, we can start to see data about, okay, what if 5 or 6 of our kids are really struggling with that critical thinker, that they're approaching, but they're not meeting the standard. Now I could do some more small group chunking of lessons for those kids. Or if all the kids aren't approaching, now it might be a me issue. I, as a teacher, can adjust and say, you know what, I really need to change how I'm presenting. And it can create some good in our teacher-based team, some good dialogue also. And in our database data teams at a system level, we can talk about, just like we talk about content, we should be talking about the skills if we truly believe this is what a kid should have when they graduate. Then the last step is always, and here's just an image of a data dashboard of our progress, is in anything that is design based, and this is really design, we need to reflect, revise, and repeat. So year to year, or semester to semester, whatever you choose as your time for your iterations, you are truly looking at the work, seeing where you were, and being able to revise to end up improving from year to year. Because at the end of year one, to be honest, think about anything you've ever designed as an educator. Year one, if you get it right, it's luck. But by the end of year three, that's where the skill and the art starts taking place, and we start to see big growth. And by the end of that year seven, like what Ken had told us, that's when I start to hope that we're getting to the point where our graduates truly are meeting what's in our portrait of a graduate. So I'm gonna give you guys, I shared my dream. I want you guys to think about and share in the chat if you have something. If this happened for every teacher and student in your school, and you were to walk through the hallways of that school and choose any grade level, what would be different? What would you be hearing? What would you be seeing that you're not hearing and seeing today? So share a little bit in the chat of what you think you would hear and see differently if your school made it to that 10.
Give everyone a minute to pop it into the chat. I know often even, thinking about walking through the schools of a high school, hearing students really talking about what's next, not just coming into grade 10, even thinking about what am I going to be when I grow up, and actually having that built into their plan today. Christina says lots of students growing and learning how to be ready for the upcoming life challenges, not just work-related challenges. For exposures of the skills building will lead to mastery. Oh, I like that, Jean.
And then I see the other Christina who's in the chat. I'd hear more academic discourse outside the classroom, more goal-oriented conversation and hopes for their own future. Yeah, and I did a bunch of research in one of my jobs that talked about that kids who have career self-efficacy, they understand who they are and what they want to do in the future by the end of 8th grade, have higher academic achievement at the high school level. So I think that that's really, that fits that um, that piece there. That was my original dissertation topic, but I fell in love with AI, and at the same time I was writing. So now we're studying agency and AI, and
Mhm.
the research is limited, so I hope to contribute. So
That's why we need more of it.
yes, absolutely. So feel free to keep adding to the chat and add some questions on.
Mhm. So now thinking through what's next. Just put the link in the chat as well. So if you're getting to that place of you want to learn more, how can seeing what Toby went through today and took us all through, how Learning Genie can not only show you how lessons can come to life in this way, but having a conversation with the team that really takes you through how you could bring Portrait of a Graduate to life in your district, but also keeping in mind state standards, student agency, co-creation. It's all within the tool, and the team will sit down and actually walk you through a lot of that for what really matters in your district. So if you scan the QR code, the link is also in the chat. We've also added to the chat, and we'll add it again. Anyone can get started with Learning Genie for free. It's just a quick sign up, and then you can start building lessons, and you can see this all come to life in the practical way. As Toby said, we showed you a bit of a cooking show. So you saw some of the inputs, and then we pulled the baked cookies out of the oven. Again, that's to be mindful of your time, so you have the opportunity to walk through it. And you're also more than welcome to share all that information with your educators. Toby, Jean, any last words before we wrap today?
I enjoyed sharing with everyone today. I prefer interactive sessions, so that's the only thing I don't like about webinars. I'd love to have been able to talk to you in person. So if you ever want to engage in some dialogue with me, here's some ways to contact me. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the social media that I use most often. My website is creatinglearners.com, which will have my contact information, and feel free to email me, toby@creatinglearners.com anytime. I'll respond back pretty quickly, and love to have conversations going forward, either through text or hopping on a call to talk about these things with you.